So good afternoon or good evening, Saqib Malik, Suniya Qureshi here, and on behalf of UKAFF, UK Asian Film Festival, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Our team has been hugely disappointed with having to cancel the 2020 festival.
Yes.
And like other promoters, artists, and individuals working in the performing arts space, it's a big hit for us not to be able to showcase the fabulous content that we've been working on securing the last 1 year.
Yes.
And one of those pieces was Baaji, which we intended to screen as a debut screening in UK.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about how you've been affected with the recent COVID lockdown, and as an artist, how managing your time.
Well, I mean, it's obviously just taken, it's like the rug being taken away from, someone's right from under someone's feet. It's COVID has taken everyone by surprise everywhere. And I think this is one of those very rare times around the world where, universally people are feeling and going through the same thing. Of course, each country and, depending on whether it's a city or a village or whatever, the people are dealing with it slightly differently, but, we're kind of all in the same boat. We didn't, I think no one had any time to prepare for something like this. It just came and kind of engulfed all of us. And in Pakistan, like all other artists, we spent the first 2 weeks just trying to grapple with the situation and fathom it and understand what it is that we're supposed to do. Because, our work, at least filmmakers, requires, shooting, people, crews. We were in the midst of projects. I basically am a television commercial filmmaker, an ad filmmaker. I was about to go into a shoot for an ad, and I had to cancel it at the last minute because it had kids and adults and everything. And ever since the lockdown has happened, I guess it's been, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's also been a real blessing because it's given people like me who've been on such a crazy, kind of
Roller
tempo
coaster.
to just slow down and take course of life and think about myself, think about what I've done, think about where I want to go, what kind of work do I want to do. So in a way, I've had a lot of time to self-reflect around the world and to catch up with a lot of basic things, that one never gets time to do.
Yeah.
And I also think that, people are asking me because, we're always so used to planning and doing something and, just not doing anything is considered not worthy of oneself. I think it's one of those times in your life where planning anything is futile. And it's great that anything that you plan is kind of meaningless. So I've just stopped thinking and planning and doing something constructive, so to say, because it's just nice to be. Otherwise, we're always in the past or in the future. So
yeah,
maybe something good will come out of this.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a eureka moment. You never know.
Yes.
About eureka moments, I watched Baaji, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved it for a variety of reasons. But before I go into that, I wanted to ask you, how did the story of Baaji emerge? I mean, as a male director, producer, you really got into the grips of a female psyche. So where did Baaji come from?
Well, thank you, first of all, for saying that you liked it, because the film gets a very divided view. It's like what Mira's character or Shamira says, love me or hate me, but you can never replace me. So I'm always worried about how people are going to react to it. But essentially, I've been wanting to make a feature film for a long time, actually since 2004. And I've been through a whole series of, writing scripts, developing scripts, and not being able to execute them either because something went wrong at the last minute logistically, or my financer didn't quite come through, or because I just didn't feel that the scripts were good enough. And I had this idea for a very long time about um, the idea of being in transition. And the film world has always been so fascinating, provides such a fascinating backdrop for stories. And I thought, okay, here's the end of what we would call Lollywood, the old traditional, you know, film industry or the film world that Pakistan had, which was basically
The Tumka Brigade.
the Tumka Brigade, or the film world of the Lahore
Yeah.
studios. So Lahore had 4 or 5 studios that churned out these masala movies, whether they were in Urdu or Pashto or Punjabi, but they all had a, you know, certain tentpole ideas, and they all had a certain ingredients that were very necessary, and they were all made produced within the 4 walls of those studios. Of course, they shot out, but they were produced in the studios. And that entire studio culture began to disappear in the early 80s, and by the late 90s. And by 2004, 2005, that culture had almost gone under. And for an industry that once produced nearly 200 films a year, there were maybe 5 or 6, maybe 10 films being produced a year, mostly in Pashto, very few in Urdu and Punjabi. And slowly, a couple of films started being made, such as Shoaib Mansoor's Khuda Ke Liye and Bol, and you know, Cup, and a few more. And suddenly there was this huge audience out there that came to see these films. Now, this audience wasn't the audience that used to go and see the masala films. That was basically a male, urban, blue collar, working class audience. And because Indian films were recently allowed in, so a whole new audience started going and seeing Indian films. New cinemas started coming up in posher parts of town that were in better state condition. So a lot of your middle class, upper middle class audiences started going to see films. So their expectations of Pakistani cinema were very different than the earlier world. And once Bol and Khuda Ke Liye succeeded, one realized, okay, so then now you can have new voices in cinema, make films that break away from that, you know, traditional mold of Lollywood. And so I had this idea about basing a story which is rooted on that historical point of change. And one of my favorite films of all time has been Sunset Boulevard, which was a Hollywood film made in 1950. And I love classic Hollywood cinema. I mean, I grew up on it, right? You know, film noir and the great Hollywood dramas. And Sunset Boulevard was a film about a female leading star of the silent era trying to make a comeback in the talkies. And it starred Gloria Swanson, who was a big star of the silent era, trying to make a comeback in the talkies. So there was meta narrative there, and it starred her. And I was I was very interested about this being on this cusp of change. And then I was really fascinated with, you know, the lives of some of the movie stars who were grappling this, like Meera, who was a big star of the 90s, and how she was desperate to make a comeback, and how, you know, she continued to be this person of mystery and larger than life interest to people, even though people had never seen a film of hers. You know, this audience had never seen her in cinemas. So I had this idea. I took it to my script writer, Irfan Ahmed Urfi, and we discussed it, and we thought, okay, so we're going to do this film, but we're going to do this film both as a critique of Lollywood, but also as an homage to Lollywood. So we wanted to have the same kind of pacing. We wanted to have the same kind of tropes as that film, but obviously at a distance, so that it is that film and yet it isn't that film. It's a comic world and yet it isn't that.
Woven them in,
Yes. So I wanted all the songs and dances that one grew up with, because those were part of Lollywood cinema. But at the same time, I wanted this film to be, to have characters that were multidimensional, that were flawed, to have a story, style of storytelling that while filmy was also palatable to today's audiences, that,
Mm-hmm.
opened doors and provided insights in ways that that cinema perhaps only caricatured. Um, and so, that's what we did. So we wanted to have fun and to celebrate it, and for people to come in and see a movie that they could relate to, from a genre that they could relate to, but at the same time, um, it could stand alone as a film that is very contemporary, if
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And it kind of hits on my next question, that the choice of casting very much reflects what you just said. So the old faces that one could pick out and say, oh, I've seen them in an 80s Lollywood
Right,
film. And, that kind of represents that old villainous kind of side hero, anti-hero. And then these
right,
new, fresh face, very, peppy millennials who represent
right,
today, and that kind of feisty and go-getting sense of wanting to win something in life. So merging the two, I think that was really clever, that not just in the storyline but the choice of characterization, the cast was really spot on, because that came across, and especially someone who's grown up with, like yourself, watching Lollywood films as well as Bollywood, you can immediately pick those characters out. So you did a great job
right.
doing that. Yeah.
So I was very lucky. I had a great cast, really. And I've always believed that, if you can hook people with the characters in the first few minutes of the film,
Yeah.
your work is done. If you can come up
Mm.
with compelling characters, everything is easy. And of course, good actors who can really, you know, give flesh those characters out.
Mm.
And so Meera was just my natural choice, because she's somebody who continues to have so much fascination across the board. Older people who, in their 50s and 60s, younger people who have,
Mm.
in their teens, millennials. Um, and also, she really strongly divides people. People love her, and some people really dislike her. But people are
Mm.
fascinated by her because, the context of a conservative, so-called, I don't think Pakistan is a conservative society at all. I think
No.
it's very conservative on the surface, or likes to pretend to be conservative and talks about
Mm.
piety and culture. But actually, it's like any other culture.
Mm.
It's very paradoxical. It's very alive
Very
and
vibrant,
flexible,
and
very vibrant.
yeah.
And so I was very intrigued about casting somebody like her, because people are so willing to vilify her, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who really sympathize and empathize with her and are fascinated by her. So
Mm.
they're willing to open their world and their minds to her.
So
And then,
you
of course,
couldn't have,
I had,
you couldn't have chosen a closer character in real life to your Shamira character, actually, and what
well,
to
and it's
work
so tough.
with.
Well, it so turns out, but it wasn't, that's not the way it was intended. But, as we continued, once she came on board and as we continued writing the film, the film was always in a state of writing. We'd
Mm.
come to the day of the shoot, we realized, okay, no, this is to happen, this has to happen. And I had a really good team of script editors as well, along with of course, the writer. Angeline Malik was a script editor, and then Usman, who was in the film, was also script editor. So we kept changing all of that. And, just, I guess we lucked out. But sorry, yeah, I lost my train of thought. What I was saying was that as we progressed into the film became kind of surreal, in the sense that it really became like a meta narrative at so many levels. Without us knowing, it became such a case of art imitating life,
Mm.
because not
Yeah.
only did it become almost Meera playing her own self, which has
Oneself.
never really happened, right? So she's actually, well, not really, but
Yeah.
in an essence, she's
But in,
actually
yeah,
playing
yeah.
herself.
Yes.
Um, and then there were many other things in the film, like originally Amna Ilyas was supposed to just come in for the opening song. But
Mm.
at the last minute, I had so many dropouts for that role because nobody wanted to work with Meera. They were so intimidated that ultimately Amna came on at the very last minute to play the role of Neha. And
Yeah.
the girl who was supposed to come in the dance sequence at the beginning, who replaces Meera, I asked Mehwish Hayat. And
Mm,
actually, Mehwish Hayat became a star through Billy in Na Maloom Afraad, in which she
mm.
replaced Meera.
Wow, that must have hurt.
Yeah, so yeah, it
So
did.
in
So in
so-
here, in this film,
yeah,
Shamira character was
uh-huh.
replaced by Mehwish Hayat. And so,
Mm.
there's so many other little things
So
in the film that were kind of
Saqib,
so,
this is totally unintended genius. You do realize
I
that?
don't know. And then one last thing, um, when we got Amna Ilyas, I mean, so many people told me later on that you've also, from the other side, you've done the story of Jia Ali. So Jia
Mm,
Ali was this dusky model back in the 90s who
yeah.
worked at the salon, and she had a problem with the salon's owner, and she became a big movie star.
Mm,
And that's Jia Ali's story. Sorry for
yeah.
being said. And
Yeah.
everybody told me, well, that is the story uh, of Neha in the film. She's a dusky girl who works at a salon and
Mm,
becomes a movie star.
yeah.
And guess what salon she worked in? This I filmed the all those sequences at Depilex, and Jia Ali used to work at Depilex.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah, and Amna Ilyas started her career working at a salon as well, by the
Mm,
way. So she
yeah.
knew, I mean, she had no issues massaging Mira's feet and doing all of the stuff. Anyway, so there goes
No,
it.
it's brilliant. And again, something I kind of noted is it's very real and raw and in your face. And often movies with commercial appeal, even if they're dealing with really big, serious social issues, have a little bit of a veneer. Here, you really kind of shown the mirror to the audience on every character. And I thought that was very refreshing. And I wondered, how was the reception of that style of storytelling in Pakistan and elsewhere?
Well, I think audiences here were a little confused. It depends, it so depends on the audience. But first of all, I'd like to say one thing. Baaji succeeded primarily because of the female audience, women who thronged to the cinemas to see it. I mean, I was making a women's picture, as you'd say, like George Cukor or, of that
Yeah.
ilk, Billy Wilder.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was doing that kind of a film. And, Pakistan had many filmmakers in the 70s who specialized in the women's picture, like Hassan
Yeah.
Tariq, Suleiman, and all of that. So I knew I was doing that um, because I wanted to show um, the female characters as multidimensional, flawed, living, thriving, full-bodied and full-blooded. I don't know if there's such a word as full-blooded. Well, full-bodied,
Full-blooded. Yeah.
full-blooded. Yes,
Yeah.
full-blooded, full, full-blooded characters. And people told me you're committing, professional suicide because either you should make a rom-com or do a
Mm,
comedy or do a male-centric film because nobody's going to come and see a female-centric film. I said, no, the story really requires that I do this, and I'm going to do it because I believe in it. And so I was really scared shitless because I had no big stars in the film. Meera used to be a big star a long time ago, and I
yeah.
didn't know how people would react to it, right? So
Yeah.
when the film got released, so universally women loved it.
Mm,
Of starting from the age of like I'd go into the theaters, um, and of course it had an A rating in part of the country, which meant under 18 couldn't see it in this parts of the country, but in other parts of the country it had a whatever 14 or something. Um, Girls from the age of 15 to women to the age of 80 thronged to the cinema like they haven't in years.
yeah.
And that's what all the exhibitors told me. They said, we haven't had audiences like this. And I'd go
Yeah.
to the cinema and I'd see like 75-year-old women coming to the cinema with 10 other women. So that was really, really amazing how women reacted to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that said something as to how women would like to see themselves represented or who they could relate to and how they could relate to characters. So mostly, I think women reacted quite positively to the film. Men, on the other hand, some people um, enjoyed it because I put in the character of Chand Kamal, who was obviously the crowd pleaser, the talent agent, who was a bit of a, but who was empowered at the same time. He knew what he was wanted to do, and he had a way of getting, things done, however unpalatable that might have been. So some audiences like the millennials just didn't get it because they didn't understand Lollywood. They'd never seen Lollywood. But overall, I think people opened up to the film and they felt it was something they hadn't seen before. Full-bodied, full-blooded sexual characters, sexually alive characters. And I keep saying that because I wanted to make a film that was also sexually alive. I was sick of seeing cinema that was so kind of puerile or so crass and so vulgar, at never sexy.
Absolutely. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, because in a culture that we have in Pakistan, which is very sensual, women's sexuality is supposed to be invisible. You're supposed to be totally benign. And that never... Yeah, absolutely. There are two extremes. Yeah, the nun or the whore. But I think having a strong female protagonist in your story, in all her glory, warts and all, was refreshing, and it was honest. And I think that level of honesty is lacking in many things in Pakistan, in public spaces. So I think people really relish that, that honesty, the realness, and the fact that you have a strong female protagonist. And maybe be making a Thelma and Louise Pakistani style.
Yeah.
Maybe that's to come. But I mean, it's really good to hear that the female audiences in Pakistan really got it and kind of, gravitated towards Baaji. Because I think that is a major success on your part as a filmmaker.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you kind of mentioned that this was your first main film project.
Yeah, the first feature film.
Project, but this is your first feature.
Yeah, I've been in this business for a very long time, making TV commercials, music videos, but this was my first feature, yes.
Yeah, and how was it? I mean, because a lot of people who embark on their first film project, it's a very scary, very costly, your whole life is, put on hold, and some people have various breakdowns or bankruptcy. How is it for you as embarking on that first feature project?
Well, all of the above. Basically, I just decided, okay, I'm just going to dive into the deep and let's see where I swim to. Hopefully I'll find a shore. But you really don't know what you're getting into, because once I was financing it myself, I was the executive producer, I co-wrote it, and of course I directed it. And because we really don't have a full industry here, and we're still learning the ropes. We're a very young industry, like we're born again.
Yeah.
And, back, say, 20 years ago, there were still ways, a whole system by which to make a film. We're remaking that system now. But I just knew that I wanted to do this, and there was no way I was going to look back. And I took, a lot of risks, like casting Meera, who hadn't worked in 15 years, as my main protagonist, and then taking an unpredictable, a script that people said nobody's going to be interested in, a story of two women. I remember once, for example, Ali Zafar telling me, Saqib, who's interested in a story about a fading film star? I said, just watch.
Yeah.
And when the film got released, he was very gracious and generous and really, complimented me. But so it was all of that. But I knew I was just going to dive into the deep, and I had to get it done, and that was it.
Well, good for you. And I think
we managed.
And it takes the bravery of artists to push a story out, even withstanding all the naysayers, and I think often is the case that great projects have more naysayers than not, if that's makes sense.
But I would like to add one thing, which is very important, is that, I was also at a period in my life where I was on on the cusp of change and transition. I'd been in the advertising industry for a very long time. Things were changing rapidly. a lot of young people coming in. I too was, beginning to feel like I needed to reinvent myself, that I was no longer that useful in that world. And I kind of really related to the character of Shamira.
Mm.
So I knew exactly where she was coming from and her desperation to remain relevant, and how, as artists, or how, as actors or directors, or whatever we do, where our sense of existence is based on a response from the other side, how important that is, and how what an existential crisis it is when people don't want you. So I could really relate to that. So for me, this film was also do or die. So some of those lines that I wrote, like "Ya to ye film banegi ya main mar jaungi," when Meera says it, because it's about the film that she's financing in the film. When I was writing that, I had a big smirk on my face, because that was coming right from my
From the
heart.
heart. Yeah.
Yeah. So
No,
yeah, I guess there was a
fantastic.
lot of Shamira in me as
Yeah.
a as a as a
Well,
director when I
that
was as well.
absolutely, well, the credibility of the characters
It's
comes
a midlife crisis.
absolutely. And I think we all, and now the lockdown and COVID globally has made
Yes.
us kind of reflect more. I think many people are at a juncture, and that's why artistry, film, storytelling become ever so more important. I mean, we're always fighting that corner to make sure that that content comes out, because it's still relevant. It still hits the core for people. And just finally, Saqib, just wanted to ask, what's the next big project? Is there a sequel to Shamira? The return of Shamira, or as I mentioned, the Thelma and Louise style return? Is there more to come? Any sort of exciting projects that you're able to dazzle our audience with and keep them waiting on?
Well, the thing is that Meera keeps making these public, announcements.
Announcements.
There's going to be Baaji 2. And I'm like, Meera, please check
I
with me,
love
because
it.
there's no Baaji 2, because Baaji died in that film. It could be a prequel, but
Oh,
no, there's nothing. I think once that film is done, it's done. Yes, I would love to work with that team again. I'd love to work with Meera again. I'd love to work with all of them, but I think that film is done. Now, like I said, in this right now, given the state of the world, and given the state of our industry, and given the state of what's going to the cinema is going to mean in the next year or two.
mhm.
Remember, Pakistani cinema was already reeling after we stopped Indian films
Yeah.
last year. So cinema was really going under, and now, it's with this whole thing happening, for it to restart, it's going to be a real issue. So I think planning anything for cinema, it's a bit premature right now. I've got some ideas, but
Mm.
I think right now what I'm more interested in is doing a documentary, and doing a very personal documentary. Um, I've been watching a lot of kind of real life dramas and feature docs of late, of course, thanks to Netflix, because that's
Yeah.
been such and Amazon and all these other streaming platforms, as well as YouTube. It's got some amazing stuff. So I've got an idea of a feature doc, and I've got a character in mind for that, who I'm going to speak to, a personality. And I think it's a really, really interesting subject. And it's kind of linked to my love of cinema and my love of Pakistani cinema. And some of the themes that were explored in Baaji might kind of, overlap with this. But what it'll allow me to do is narrow in and do something very personal and more focused. I mean, Baaji was, at the end of the day, a big film, right? It was like big
Mm.
emotions, big
Yeah.
drama.
Yeah.
This will be something very narrow. So yeah, just recently I decided I think this is what I'm going to do. So I guess you're the first to know that I'm researching
Good.
now on a
Good.
on a on a documentary, and I hope to be able to shoot that a couple of months from now, because it'll be much easier to shoot, and I think it'll be something again close to my heart. Whenever
Yeah.
we do something like this, people like me, because I can always go back and do ads to make money. Film has to be something that has to come from within. It's got to be relevant and meaningful to me
Yeah.
for the time that one is going to put into it, and for what it represents. So
Yeah.
whatever I do, hopefully it should have my stamp on it, whatever that is.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Saqib, for your time and your
Thank you.
great insights and sharing your journey of Baaji and all the moving parts that have gone into such a great film. What we hope to see more of it, and even potentially see more collaboration maybe between UK talent and
I hope so. Absolutely.
totally stay safe in this COVID environment we're in, and long may the artistry continue.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you. And of course, very disappointed that one couldn't make it to Tongue of Fire, because it's really such a renowned festival. And I'd heard and I read, actually, I saw the lineup of films that you had. It was excellent, and I was excited to meet all the people and be a part of that. But that's fine, I'm sure there's going to be another time. And I hope that
absolutely
we stay in touch. It's very important, more than ever.
Totally. And we will be screening Baaji to subscribers online. So we will give you feedback, because our audience is very excited to watch it here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saqib.
Take care.